Today we're going to be talking about natural sweeteners, specifically the market leader, Stevia, and a promising new competitor, monk fruit. We're going to be looking at scientific evidence, which investigates their impact on weight loss, on insulin and glucose regulation, gut health, and the gut microbiome. And finally, we're going to talk about probably the hottest topic, and that is their impact on the risk of cancer. All of the research that I will be using for the video is going to be linked down in the description box below if you want to check out something for yourself. Enough rambling, let's get right into the video. We're starting off with the well-known natural sweetener that most people would choose over artificial sweeteners, stevia. The Stevia rebaudiana plant originates from South America, and its leaves have been known for hundreds of years for their sweet taste. However, the Stevia rebaudiana plant as a whole plant is not authorized for its use. What you are actually buying when you go and get stevia from the grocery store, or what you see on your ingredient list, are the glycosides that are extracted and isolated from the stevia leaves. There are two ones in question that are also being investigated in research papers most of the time, namely stevioside and rebaudioside A. And only the glycosides from the leaves have been authorized for use in over 150 countries, including the US and also the European Union. Stevia is not a perfect sweetener. It has a slightly bitter aftertaste, but its sweetness is up to 400 times stronger than that of sugar. Like many other sweeteners, stevia is not really digested by our enzymes. It reaches our gut intact, and then it can be metabolized by the gut bacteria to steviol, which then reaches the bloodstream, goes over to the liver, then it is conjugated there, it is transformed into something else, and after that it exits our body through the urine. Over here I have natural with a question mark, and that is because a lot of people assume that when they see the label natural that they're going to get something in its unprocessed form, in its most natural form. However, the stevia sweetener, as I said, is being extracted from the plant, and the way this happens is that the leaves are put into hot water so the water can extract the glycosides. Then the water has to be purified for other compounds to be removed, such as fiber for instance, and in the end these highly purified glycosides in the water, all of this is being crystallized and then sold to the consumer as a very pure sweetener extract. So stevia sweetener itself is actually quite a highly processed product. I'm not trying to give it a bad rep for that, I'm just saying that it is in no way as nature originally made it to be. Now let's look at the data regarding stevia. We're going to start over with its impact on gut health and the gut microbiome. The data is unfortunately very mixed. Most of the studies are done on animals, rats specifically, and a lot of other studies are done on cell lines. Those are the so-called in vitro studies, and animal studies are in vivo studies. While a lot of studies show little or no impact of stevia on the gut microbiome, of course you can also find some that support the thesis that it has a negative influence, such as one paper that investigated the impact of stevia on two specific strains that are good for our gut, some lactobacilli and some bifidobacteria, I believe. And it found that stevia decreased the activity of those two specific strains. Other papers even suggested that stevia might have some impact also on the gut lining and other types of bacteria, which might lead to increased inflammation. But here it's very important to mention that in general, animal studies do not translate directly to human studies. The huge lack of human data on this topic is where the big gap of research is, and definitely no conclusions can be made. However, to compare this with my previous video on artificial sweeteners, where I also talked about gut health, the data and the overall outlook of gut health and stevia was definitely a bit better compared to what the situation with the artificial sweeteners looked like. Here there were a lot more other studies that suggested that there might be little or no impact of stevia on the gut microbiome, which I believe is one step in a more positive direction compared to what I looked at for the other video that I made. The data on stevia and weight loss is actually quite positive, which also seems like a pretty logical outcome, since if you substitute sugar for stevia, then you're going to reduce the caloric intake drastically, which would lead to weight loss. But if you've watched my previous video, you know that that is not always the case. But here, most of the studies suggested that participants who replaced sugar for stevia did experience a very great weight loss. Or there was this one paper where one group was consuming a stevia sweetened beverage and the other group was the control group. In the period of the study, the control group gained some weight in the process, while the other group had a better weight maintenance. So overall, there are no indications that stevia might induce cravings or increase the likelihood of consuming more sweet things. And since we're talking about sweet things, the data on blood glucose regulation and insulin also looks more positive than I would have expected, since most of the papers indicate that the consumption of stevia does not cause any changes in insulin or blood glucose levels. And there was this paper even that was done on diabetic rats, which suggested even a possible benefit for improving overall glucose regulation and insulin production while consuming stevia. To be honest, all of this started confusing me as I was making the video, since the other video on artificial sweeteners, which are also technically with no calories but are just different chemical structures and everything, had a much more negative reputation when talking about all of these things. And it was very surprising for me to find another atmosphere around stevia. Moving on to the toxicity data, which is probably the topic that most people are the most afraid of. But to reassure you, the data on stevia and adverse outcomes is positive most of the time. No specific adverse health effects are found in most of the papers, and of course there are some papers which say the contrary. One of them saw adverse effects in female rats, but the doses that were given to them were around 10 times the acceptable daily intake. Once a substance is approved for use in products, there needs to be an acceptable daily intake defined, and for stevia that is between 0 and 4 milligrams per kilogram body weight per day. And the general opinion based on population studies is that most people are not going to exceed or even go near the acceptable daily intake. There are some specific groups which are more susceptible to reaching these upper levels, such as children, mostly because they have a lower body weight, but they at the same time favor sweet things a lot. However, I think if the parent is health conscious enough, this can definitely be mediated. This was more of the exception than the general rule. If I give you this one negative paper, I'm not giving it to you to fearmonger you out of consuming stevia. I just want you to understand better that science and research is not very much black and white, and you need to be looking at the more general picture. Also, when you see an article on the internet that says new study finds something, this was one study, and everybody needs to be more focused on the bigger picture of substances and research around them. Going back to the main topic, there might be also some benefits of stevia that we do not know about yet for sure if they apply also to humans. Some studies that were done on cell lines and in animals suggest that stevia might have some anti-inflammatory and antioxidative properties that we previously do not know of. Even some research papers that were done on specific cell lines, they suggest that stevia might have some positive influence regarding colon cancer cells, which are very promising findings, and I think they deserve more attention than they get, since the general atmosphere around sweeteners is pretty negative. So what is our general conclusion on stevia after looking at all of the studies? Stevia, if you have to compare it to an artificial sweetener, would, in my opinion, be a bit of a safer choice to go with. Not only because of the negative reputation of artificial sweeteners, but also because the general outlook of all of the data with stevia is pretty positive. And again, there are some negative studies here and there, but the positive sides outweigh them. I am generally not somebody that consumes a lot of artificial artificial sweeteners. A lot of people's main consumption of sweeteners comes from diet sodas, and I don't drink any soda, I never have, so this already helps a lot. If you can not overdo the sweet consumption in general, it wouldn't matter that much if it was the normal sugar version, the artificially sweetened version, or the stevia sweetened version. As I've said 100 times on the channel, the key to everything is moderation and not going for one or the other extreme. I got a little bit distracted again, but now we're going to move into monk fruit. Monk fruit originates from China and Eastern medicine, if you did not know, and its main compound are the mogrosides. These are again also the extracts that are approved for use in the US and some other countries, but not in Europe. The European Food and Safety authorities have not given the green light for the use for all types of monk fruit extracts. We're going to get into this in a bit. It is approximately 250 times sweeter than sugar, so it is quite similar to stevia, but in terms of its metabolism in the human body, this really surprised me. It can actually be digested to an extent by enzymes, and some of it is metabolized by our gut bacteria. So why does the FDA allow monk fruit, but the European Union has said no? The thing with monk fruit is that there is definitely not as much data on it as there is on other sweeteners. The main argument in 2009 and then also repeated in 2024 is that there is a lack of chronic consumption data, and monk fruit and some animal studies, specifically one in question, have indicated that there might be some quite important health risks regarding monk fruit consumption. There was this 90-day trial specifically, again done in mice. This investigated the impact of monk fruit on them, and some adverse effects on their reproductive systems were found. And it appears that it might be mediated by this specific compound, mogroside V or 5, I'm not sure, but this is the one in question that raises some concerns. For now, as of 2024, the FDA has allowed a specific aqueous monk fruit extract, but there are no highly purified non-aqueous extracts allowed for use in the European Union. Now that you know all about the controversy around monk fruit and why not everybody in the world can order some and put it in their banana bread or brownies, or I don't know what people use it for, let's look at some of the positive data around monk fruit. There were some studies on the impact of monk fruit on blood glucose and insulin regulation, and generally the outlook was quite positive, and it showed a reduction in blood glucose and improved insulin regulation compared to sugar, which I think is expected from a sweetener to not raise your blood glucose the same way that sugar does. So this is a positive but not an unexpected finding. What is more interesting is that there was this trial done on 103 patients which suffered from specific throat discomfort, and they had to consume monk fruit extract and also black tea as control, and it was found that the group that consumed the monk fruit extract had a better throat pain relief and discomfort relief compared to the control group, which suggests that there might be some anti-inflammatory effects. This was also mentioned in other studies, the impact of monk fruit on inflammation. I think I mentioned it in the beginning of the video that monk fruit has been a part of Eastern medicine for a long time now. As you can see, I did not talk about the impact of monk fruit on gut health and the gut microbiome diversity. This is because there is little to no data on this topic yet. I managed to find one study in vitro, and it found some favorable influences on some of the beneficial strains in our gut, but again, this is only one research paper and it is an in vitro study, so no definite conclusions can be made. So what is the general outlook of monk fruit after looking at all of the data? Personally, in my opinion, monk fruit does not have enough data on it. I don't mean positive or negative, I mean any data, to choose it over stevia or artificial sweeteners or sugar or whatever one likes to consume. The thing is that the data that is already out there is less concerning than the data that is not yet out there, and you do not know what to expect, and you see how new research on different topics comes out every single year. And when something like this does not have enough evidence on it yet, this would not personally be my first choice if I want to go for a sweetener. To make a conclusion on not only these two sweeteners, but the topic of artificial, non-artificial sweeteners in general, I am going to repeat myself and say that as long as you're consuming even sugar in moderation and you're not overdoing anything, the chance that you're going to cause any type of adverse effects is pretty low or non-existent, especially if you're a healthy individual. And anything that you come across online that causes anxiety in you, again, I mentioned this study found that artificial sweeteners cause brain to age faster, or I don't know what I read the other day. Those adverse effects are not going to be seen from one diet soda per day. And I sincerely do not want you to start being afraid of everything that you're consuming. As I already explained, if you go and start looking up different things, you're going to quickly find out that there is both negative and positive data on almost everything. And the research area is a lot more gray than you would expect. I hope that now you have all the information that you need to make your own informed choices about different sweeteners and substitutes of sugar. Let me know down in the comments below if you enjoyed the video or if you have a suggestion for the next one. Also, do not forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content for today, and maybe even check out my website. I offer nutrition counseling services, and there are also some extra resources on there. The link is going to be in the description box below. Thank you again very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.